Watch closely. The most feared attacker of his era is about to throw everything at one king and lose anyway. It begins in a whisper. Tartakower nudges a pawn to c4, claiming a sliver of center, hiding his plan. Spielman answers in the heart of the board, a pawn striking to e5, daring white to commit. No hurry from Tartakower. A modest pawn to e3, no tell, nothing given away. A knight slides out to c6 for Spielman, eyeing the squares white just left soft. Now the center cracks open. White's pawn lunging to d4 and challenging everything at once. Black takes a pawn, snapping off the one on d4, and the tension snaps with it. Tartakower recaptures on d4, and the position settles into a quiet, humming symmetry. Right back comes Spielman in the center, a pawn to d5, planting his flag. Out comes a knight to f3, calm and natural, white still refusing to show a plan. Black's knight mirrors it to f6, both armies coiling, neither side blinking. The bishop steps to e2, unassuming, but every quiet move here is loaded. Spielman's bishop emerges to e6, guarding, watching, the board holding its breath. White cracks the center at last, a pawn capturing on d5, and pieces begin to fly. Back comes the knight to d5 for black, recapturing, sitting proud in the middle. Tartakower tucks his king into the corner, castling to safety, the calm before something stirs. Quietly, a bishop slips to e7 for Spielman, patient, the attacker still hiding his fangs. Suddenly, the bishop swings across to b5, pinning, pressing hard on that knight. Spielman castles too, his king to the corner, both monarchs hidden away for now. Tartakower's bishop snaps off the knight on c6, trading sharpness for structure. Black recaptures with a pawn to c6. His pawn's doubled now, a faint scar showing. The knight leaps to e5, planting itself deep in black's half. Bold, intrusive. Leaning in, a bishop comes to d6, pressing that proud knight. And the knight snatches a pawn on c6, greedy, deep behind enemy lines. Here come the fireworks. Spielman's queen lands on h4, finally baring his teeth. Unbothered, the knight slides back to e5, daring the queen to do something. A jab, a pawn to f6 kicks the knight, loosening squares around black's own king. Calmly, the knight glides back to f3, the storm still gathering across the board. The queen drifts to h5, hovering, hunting for a way inside. A second knight develops to c3, Tartakower quietly stacking up defenders. Black's knight crashes into c3, taking the new arrival clean off. Back goes a pawn to c3, recapturing, white structure ragged now, but holding. There it is. The bishop springs to g4, all menace. Yet a quiet rook to e8 was stronger. This lunge lets white slip free. Tartakower calmly pokes a pawn to h3, asking the bishop a hard question. Spielman answers with steel. The bishop takes on h3, a sacrifice tearing at white's king. White accepts it, a pawn grabbing the bishop on h3, but now his king stands half naked. The queen pounces, capturing on h3, hunting the exposed king. The storm has truly broken. Tartakower stays ice cold, a rook gliding to e1, hunting counterplay down the middle. Across comes a rook to e8, the armies colliding on one file. The rook lifts to e3, a fresh defender thrown before the danger. Black's rook smashes into e3, taking it, forcing the question. Back recaptures a pawn on e3 for Tartakower, his king's cover thinning by the move. Then the check lands, the queen drops to g3, and white's king is suddenly out in the open. Now the danger is real. His king steps to f1, Tartakower walking calmly straight through the fire. More fuel for the fire. A pawn flies to g5, feeding the attack. Strangely, the knight retreats all the way home to g1. Tartakower coiling, not panicking. The pawn rolls on to g4, black storms sweeping toward the cornered king. Tartakower's other rook activates to b1, quietly readying a counterattack. Another pawn advances to f5. Spielman is all in, every pawn marching forward. Sideways slides the rook to b2, preparing to swing into the defense. A pawn pushes to h5, but Blackstorm is running short of breath. In comes the rook to f2, bolting the door in front of the king. Spielmann's queen retreats to h4, regrouping, searching for a knockout that isn't there. At last, Tartakower's queen wakes, swinging to c2, eyeing the long open lines. Restless, the queen swings to g5, the attack losing its bite. Counterpunch, Tartakower's pawn jumps to e4, turning defender into aggressor. Black jams a pawn to f4, clinging on, but the momentum has flipped. The white pawn surges to e5, splitting the board, choking Black's pieces apart. One last lunge. A pawn shoves to g3, hurled at the king. Down drops the rook to f3, blunting it, swatting the threat aside. Defeated in spirit, the bishop drops back to e7, the attacker's fire spent. And now the twist that breaks Spielmann. Tartakower's king simply strolls up to g2. The storied attack is dead. White is winning.